I just made a video trying this out, and so I'll put the link in the description box down below. But I was talking about French class in high school, and reminded me of the time that I ended up in France with the Navy. So let me give you a little story time while I finish my nightcap. So the year was 1993. I was deployed to the Mediterranean, and what happened was my job was to inspect helicopters, to inspect helicopter rotor heads for cracks and whatnot. That was one of my jobs. That was my primary job. My secondary job was I was an airframes mechanic. So I did repairs on airframes, sheet metal mechanic. I did hydraulic work. I painted aircraft, and I also helped the other job specialties like the electricians, the aircraft engine guys. We in the Navy we have our job specialties, but as part of a squadron, if the repair on the aircraft was not your primary specialty, you just become the tool bitch. But doing that for a while, you start to learn how to repair things that are outside of your specialty. But that's beside the point. So my main job was to inspect aircraft, and so every detachment, it's called non-destructive testing or non-destructive inspection. So every detachment in my squadron had a non-destructive technician, a non-destructive inspection technician with each detachment, and each detachment has has 2 aircraft, about 24 maintenance personnel, and that includes 1 inspection technician. So on deployment, chances are you are the only inspection technician on that detachment for these helicopters. So anyway, my squadron had 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 technicians, and usually 2 or 3 detachments deploy at any given time. So we were out in the Mediterranean, and it was Christmas. It was around Christmas, 1993, and we had the ship I was on, the USS Savannah. We did our last sortie of delivering supplies from to different ships, and our schedule was to go into Toulon, France, and as it just happened, my my co-inspector on another ship, on another detachment, he got sick. I won't go into that. And they had one more sortie before Christmas on their ship. It was an ammunition ship, USS Sylvania, I believe. I think if there's a picture of it, I'll put it here. So when we were done with our sortie, I had to quickly inspect our aircraft, and then his detachment, they picked me up on my ship, flew me over to the ship that he was on. He got flown into one of the base hospitals to take care of his ailment, and so I had to inspect their aircraft after they finished their last sortie, which was like the day before Christmas. So the day before Christmas, we did our standard mission. They flew supplies, came in, shut down, and I inspected the aircraft, and we basically shut down for Christmas. And the plan was they were going to drop me off on their way out because they were done. That was their last mission for their whole deployment. I think I had about 3 more months left on my deployment. So the day before Christmas, we finished the mission, and Christmas morning, we were in some rough seas. The ship was, rocking back and forth, and I don't get seasick. I don't normally get seasick, but that day I was a little queasy. I never threw up, but I was pretty queasy. So, and I think where I was bunked was below the water line. So got up that morning, went up to the hangar deck, and to see if I could feel better, because if you watch the horizon, it helps you with your motion sickness. Well, that didn't help, so I went outside, and it was probably about right above freezing. It was probably like 38 degrees, and I think we were in the Adriatic Sea, on the northwest side of Italy, and the ship was tossing, and water was coming over the flight deck and the stern, the fantail of the ship, and I basically just stripped down to my underwear. I was wearing long underwear, and I had a foul weather jacket. I had my coveralls. I started getting the sweats. So I was sitting next to the hangar on the flight deck on the outside, and I just took everything off except my long underwear, and I sat on the deck, on the flight deck side of the deck, and I just kind of rode it out. And then finally, after like a couple of hours, we were in more calm waters, and so I started getting back dressed again, and I was able to go down and get a little bit to eat, not much, just enough to settle the stomach, and went back up to the hangar deck, and I just kind of sat there, just to calm my nerves. And the supervisor of the detachment came up and basically said, "Man, you don't look so good." They had a little shack, a little compartment building on top of the hangar deck, and he said, "Why don't you go up there? We got a TV, a VCR, and some crackers and stuff, and you can watch movies and eat some crackers, and maybe you feel better." I said, "All right." So I went up there and sat down, and I eventually felt better. Anyway, fast forward. So that's how I spent my Christmas day in 1993. The ship made its way, I think before it went through the Straits of Gibraltar. I can't remember before or after, but we took off and we flew into Rota, Spain, and they dropped me off in Rota, Spain, and I was supposed to catch a flight from Rota, Spain to Toulon, France, to meet up with my detachment. So they dropped me off, and the way the flights were scheduled, I couldn't get a direct flight from Rota, Spain to Toulon, France. I had to go from Rota, Spain to Sigonella, Sicily, and then from Sigonella, Sicily, back east to Toulon, France. So I get to Toulon, France. So here's where the French story starts. I get off the plane. It was I can't remember. It was a P3. I can't remember, or a C2. Anyway, Anyway, it was a military plane. So get off the plane, and my chief in my detachment comes and picks me up, and he says, "Come on, let's go eat lunch." It was like it was like 11 o'clock or something like that. So we're on a French naval base. So he takes me into the cafeteria, and so we get our tray, and we just my chief took me there, so I figured it was the right place to go. So we we start getting our food, right, and we go through the serving line, and the French guys were kind of looking at us funny, but they just kind of shrugged and gave us food, and it was kind of like it was like a rice, some kind of rice meal, rice substance, and some small sausages, and some other things I can't remember what it was. And then they had like a little after the serving line, they had kind of like a buffet bar with a bunch of different cheeses and other things, yogurt and things like that. And then they actually had a beer tap. That I think there was a beer tap in this cafeteria. So I looked at my chief, and he just kind of shook his head like, okay. So they had like soda, had Coke, or some other kind of soda there, and I think I just got a soda. So we get our food and our drink, and we go sit down, and one of the French Navy guys came up, and he was like one of the more senior guys, and we were like, "Oh, do we have to pay first?" He was kind of motioning. He was like, "No, no, no, no." We understood that he said no, and we're like, "Oh, do we need to pay first?" And he goes, "No, no, no." And he said, "You come." And he motioned us to follow him, and we're just kind of on the food. And he goes, "No, no." He just kind of motioned, said, "Leave it there." And we're like, "Okay." So we get up and we follow him, and we go kind of through a kitchen area, from what I remember, and then we come out into another cafeteria, and he goes, "You eat here." So come to find out later, what happened is French has conscription. So everybody, from I guess 18 years old, once you're 18, you have to mandatory military service, I think for a year or 2 years. So that was the conscripted side. That was the first 2 years of service side, and we were. They wanted us to eat in the regular Navy side, the full-time military side. So we're like, okay, cool. So we go through that serving line, and the food was like much. I can't remember what it was, but it definitely had more variety, and it just presentation-wise, it looked a lot better than what we got on the other side. So we get our food, and we go to the little buffet thing. They had a way more variety of different cheeses, fruits. There were more drinks in the drink dispenser, and definitely a beer tap, and I think they had wine. I think one of the taps was wine, but yeah, my chief wouldn't go for it. So anyway, we eat, and I think we were gonna go pay, and they just say no, no. And we're like, okay, cool. So we were in Toulon, France, and this was like a few days before New Year's. So go back to the ship, do what? No, wait, I take that back. We were on the French air base, and the ship was at the port, which was several miles away. So I think we had rooms in their barracks. Again, this was 1993, so my memory is only so good. So I don't recall where we slept, but I don't recall us sleeping on the boat. We might have driven back and forth. I don't remember, but I know our helicopter was at their air base. So here's a picture of our helicopter at the French air base, and I think that's me on top of the helicopter. So anyway, New Year's Eve comes, and we didn't have anywhere to go. We didn't have anywhere to be. All our missions until after New Year's were complete, and the ship was docked too. And I think we were able to go out in town, and that's where we got the smash sandwiches. Okay, so now memory comes back. We did go back and ferry back and forth from the ship to the air base, because I remember one night one of the guys who had a bad case of halitosis. He had been drinking, and he comes out and goes, "Hey, what's everybody doing?" I was like, "Dude, you need to go brush or mouthwash or something." He's like, "Oh, I just smoked a cigarette." It's like, dude, that ain't cigarettes. But I digress. And that was on the ship. So yes, we did ferry back and forth from the ship to the air base where our aircraft were. So anyway, on New Year's Eve, a bunch of us got invited to the French air base for New Year's Eve party, because usually, like during the holidays, that particular air base, they everybody goes on holiday, everybody goes on vacation, right? Except like a skeleton crew. So they keep a skeleton crew on the base, for security and whatnot. So we get invited to the base, and it was a really, really nice dining hall. They had like linen tablecloths and everything, and so we're sitting there, and we're trying to speak a little bit French, and they're speaking broken English, and we're asking each other, hey, how long have you been in the military? Where do you live? Stuff like that, pleasantries. And of course, they liked American cigarettes, and most of the French military guys, rolled their own cigarettes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was tobacco. So we would trade, they would trade us like a bag of their tobacco, and we would give them a pack of cigarettes. And then money, dollar bills. We would trade, their francs and our dollar bills and stuff like that. So it was a good time. It was a good social time. So the first course comes, and it's a glass of wine. So we're like, we're not working. So we drink the wine, and then they bring out, I don't know in particular order, but I just remember they bring out like a little plate of cheese and like grapes, right? So that was like the appetizer. There was like 3 or 4 grapes and a couple of slices of cheese. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then they bring out some more wine. And then they bring out a little wedge of lettuce with some like ranch dressing or something, some kind of dressing on it. Eat that. Bring out another thing of cheese and a little more wine. And then they bring out like a little hunk of meat and some more wine. And then they brought out like a little thing of potatoes, like a au gratin potatoes kind of thing. And, and they just came in like little finger food plates. And of course, every plate came with a glass of wine. So, and this went on for like hours. And then they brought like some cookies, and then there was some cake, and a little more cheese, and a little more wine, a little more fruit, and it just probably all told, you've heard of those 7-course or 9-course meals. Well, yeah, the little plates like that, but if you were to put all that food on one big plate, it would be a big heaping pile of food, right? That's why I am stuffed, and I'm pretty tipsy, because I probably had about 5 or 6 glasses of wine myself. One other guy in our detachment, I think, of course, the Frenchies are pretty soused too, and so they're like banging on the table, hooping and hollering, and so they encouraged one of the other guys in my detachment to drink a whole bottle of wine. This guy here. So he, in the moment, he drank the whole bottle of wine. And of course, after he set the bottle down, it was time for the wine to come back up. And so he made a beeline for the door, went outside, and just tossed out everything he ate and drank that night. um, so anyway, good times were had by all that night, and I can't remember who was driving. Somebody in our detachment was a designated driver, so he didn't drink at all. Maybe he didn't drink at all anyway, but he drove us back to the ship, and so we went back to the ship and pretty much slept it off. Well, the next morning we had to go back to the air base to get the helicopter ready, because I think that afternoon or the day after, we had to fly back. The ship was pulling out, and we had to fly back onto the ship. We would have pulled out with the ship, and then the pilots and the air crew would have stayed with the helicopters and fly back onto the ship. But one of the guys that was hooping and hollering and banging on the tables, the French guys, he apparently was one of the gate guards, and he wasn't looking good. He wasn't smiling and happy looking like he was the night before. So we're like, "Hey, what's up?" And he was so he was not faring too well the day before, the day after. But yeah, that was a good time. That was one of the things the military affords young people is the ability to travel and see different countries and learn different cultures and stuff. So that's one of the things that takes the edge off. It doesn't make up for all the hard work or the long times away from your family, or even the possibility of getting killed. But it it took the edge off of the monotony and the hardship of being in the military. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that story and learned a little bit about French culture. All right, cheers, guys. Later. Now that deserves a lot of cowbell.